ladies, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Aisha, aka Nurse Aisha. I'm a registered nurse here to spread awareness on preventative health and lifestyle choices for us women. That is my focus, so you can lead a healthier and more informed life. Welcome back to another episode of Nurse Aisha. So, this is a female to female conversations, but obviously everyone is welcome to listen in. I am here today with yet another topic to address another health issue in our community that we need to talk about. And I have invited someone important and someone very special and dear to me to talk to today. So if you haven't subscribed to Nurse Aisha, make sure you do that now. Turn on the notification bell as well so you don't miss an upload. So before we get into this conversation, I want to introduce my dear friend, a Dr. Helen. So on today's episode, I have a special friend, a Dr. Helen Sinabulya. She's a medical doctor, a general surgeon with a specialty in general surgery and vascular surgery, and a PhD in vascular surgery. She's a friend, she's a mother, she's a woman of color. She is someone I always turn to and talk to. Very intelligent woman, someone that I love dearly, and I'm so happy to invite her here today and talk to her, and you can join in on this conversation. Okay, so Dr. Helen, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to these conversations. I am in awe for you coming here. So thank you so much. The introduction does not do her justice, so please tell us more about yourself.
I just want to begin by saying this is a great privilege. I've known you for a while. As you said, we're good friends, and I followed you on this journey, just being here in this room with you. I didn't doubt we're going to have this conversation. It's probably taken a bit longer than we both wanted this.
I know.
Than we both wanted it to take, but I'm more than honored to be here. I take this great pleasure to be here and just share my thoughts on all sorts of topics, and hopefully we're going to have more conversations.
Yes, definitely more conversations.
But just being here is just an honor. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming here, and just being in your presence is always so enlightening. There's always something that we have to talk about, and I always gain new knowledge talking to you. That is an everyday conversation, even just on the phone. You always have such good advice, and you're the perfect person. And let's make this a constant. You have agreed to come every now and then and join in conversations that, you know, I have always been talking to you guys, to myself in my living room, but being here and talking to so many intelligent women, you being one of them. And I'm so happy to have you here. I'm overjoyed.
Thank you.
Let's get into the conversation.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do that.
So there's so much to talk about, like I said, but we have chosen a specific topic to start with. Something that is very common and something that is very, I guess, both of us know this and have maybe friends and us ourselves have gone through it. So I have chosen to talk to Dr. Helen today about learning disabilities and difficulties, and more specifically dyslexia. See, I can't even say the word dyslexia, but we have a bit of similar. Let's talk about ourselves first. We have a bit of similar journeys, you and I, so you go ahead.
Yes. So let's just cut this down to a very short version of our lives. Well, we both have backgrounds from Africa, mixed background. East Africa, to be more specific, yeah. Mixed countries that we come from, Uganda and Rwanda. But born and raised in Kenya, lived there, so we speak multiple languages. And then
you do. You do.
I'm very much aware you speak multiple languages too. We're not going to get into that. Moved here as children. I moved here as a teenager. You, I think, a bit younger. And have obviously then gone to schools both in Kenya, Uganda, and Sweden, and for myself, even other countries. But when it comes to studying and learning, which brings us to today's topic with dyslexia, I've become aware of my learning disability over time, not getting a diagnosis, but just figuring out how I've been able to manage and actually become a doctor despite my learning disability, because I believe I do have dyslexia if I look through the criteria. And I think a conversation with yourself also made us aware that you have some learning disability too, and despite that, we're sitting here having this conversation
with a doctor and a nurse.
So I think the most important message to take home from today, after the whole discussion, is despite learning difficulties, you can still make it in life, whether it's academic or not, but you can get through life. Just first realizing, and also the people around you being able to pick up your learning difficulties and helping you through life. So if you're a child that does have learning difficulties, it might not be apparent to you, but the people around you should be able to pick this up to make sure that you get the assistance that you need, and so that you don't fall back in life and get cut short on ways of succeeding due to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Yes.
We have, but the topic is very, it's a general topic, but it's also very personal. It's personal journeys, and it's very common in society. And the reason I chose this topic is because I've seen grown women and men really having trouble getting through this problem, this difficulty or disability, to say. I guess when we talk about disability, it's kind of, it cuts short of people that have these problems and think that, you know, they are abnormal, I guess. So what I've seen is people living with guilt and shame because of this, and not acknowledging the problem. And this all goes back to being maybe traumatized as a child and not accepted and not getting the help that they needed and assistance. So let's start from the top, all the way from the top, because like I said, we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. So let's talk about dyslexia. But first, what are the most common types of learning disorders or disabilities?
That's actually a very good question. So depending on where you look to get all your knowledge and science about learning disabilities, they'll tell you there are either 4 or 5 or 7 common learning disorders, but I'm going to choose to focus on 4 because I believe one, due to the numbers of the people that have been diagnosed with these disorders, the 4 or 5 of them will always come up. And if dyslexia being the most common, about 1 in 10 people have dyslexia. Almost 8 billion people live with dyslexia on this earth.
Wow.
8 billion people. That's a lot of people.
That's
so walking in the street here, I mean, 1 in 10 people. So you count 10, and every 10th person has some kind of dyslexia or learning disability, right? The next most common is ADD or ADHD, right? ADD stands for Attention Deficit Disorder or Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. And from the words in that definition, maybe you can understand that due to lack of attention, from an early age, you have problems just sitting down to concentrate long enough to learn how to write, to learn how to read, to listen, which causes you to fall back, maybe in class. And if you're in a big classroom, many students, 1 teacher, that's not enough. If you won't get the support that you need, and you either become that mischievous child, right? And due to that, maybe you're thrown out of class, or you start not attending class because you are not part of the big group, gives you low self-esteem, and that could be the beginning of a very long, less successful journey. Right? So that was the second disorder, the second most common disorder. And then we have something that's called dyscalculia, which you can hear from the Latin word. I actually do not remember the Latin term, but calculate. means counting, right? So
Yeah,
then you have problems
mathematics.
with maths, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people around just listening will say it's like, oh, that's what I have. So
Yeah.
that's the name of the disorder that I have, right?
Yeah.
And then we
numbers,
have
numbers, just
numbers.
numbers
Yeah,
make
yeah,
you nervous.
yeah. You have problems with numbers and you can't really put a finger on it. And then we have something that's called dysgraphia, graphics,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
that will mean that you have a disability in writing, right?
Yeah.
And due to this, if you have this problem, the teacher around you will notice that you have problems with letters. You know, you've been in the same class, every single child's been taught the same thing, but you have this student, that for some reason has problems writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another disorder.
So the
Correct.
last two that you've mentioned,
Yeah.
the dyscalculia and the dysgraphia,
Yeah.
are umbrellas under dyslexia, right?
They are under learning disorders.
Yeah.
Right?
So they're part of a learning disorder that is kind of like dyslexia. Do I?
Not so dyslexia can involve
Okay.
even learning difficulties when it comes to writing
Yes.
and numbers, but dyslexia, we actually didn't talk about the definition of dyslexia. So
okay.
yes, so the definition of dyslexia is problems reading,
Yeah.
listening,
Yes.
and then which will obviously affect also your writing.
But also your understanding of the
And understand,
information
that you're
is-
getting in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So that is the actual. So they used to talk about it as word blindness.
Yes.
Like the word. I think maybe if you've seen it, like being filmatized, the numbers will be, or whatever you're reading. If you're reading a novel, a book, or something, the words will be like flying around, and you can't really concentrate, and maybe think that you cannot get the. Should I say the topic or whatever your reading is about?
Yes, and you'd, I mean, one example would be like, if you look at a lamp post, right?
Yeah.
When you read it, you even swap out post for lamp
Yeah.
stand.
Yeah, so
Right.
that's where the word blindness
Yeah,
comes
that's the
from.
blindness.
Or
Yeah.
just, I think I read somewhere that you would also mix up the letters, like the letter B with the D,
Yeah.
so you kind of have like that blindness. You can't
Yeah,
really see
yeah,
straight
yes,
what the
yes,
word
yeah.
is spelling out to be. So how early can you tell that your child has dyslexia or those other learning disabilities?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and when people have studied dyslexia, you can actually see it at a very, very young age, so already at the nursery age, right? So most nurseries have children singing, right?
Okay.
So you'd have a child that has problems learning the nursery rhymes.
Oh.
Yeah. So they're not even reading, because we said dyslexia it means that you have problems reading, right?
Okay.
And figuring out words. But this, at a very early stage, you'd have a child where in the whole group everyone's listening to the nursery rhyme, but this child cannot learn the nursery rhyme.
Okay.
Right? And you'd have a child that has some kind of speech impeachment, in the sense that they learn how to speak later.
Yeah.
That's kind of tricky though, right? As myself, I speak several languages, and I started off at an early age. So it's been shown that children that grow up in homes that are bilingual or even trilingual, they start speaking later. So this should not be misconstrued and believed as a learning disorder.
Yes.
That's different. But if you have a child that's a single language speaker and still has problems with his speech, then this could be an early sign of that, right?
Yeah.
And then for the children that are bilingual, trilingual, they normally say at around age 3 they should be able to speak at least one language fluently. And if they still have problems with one or all of these 3 languages that they've 2 or 3 languages they've grown up with, then again this should be a warning sign.
Okay.
Right? When they listen to stories that are being read to them, they're very willing to listen, but after a certain age, nursery age again, children are normally curious about what's written in the book and they want to see.
Yes.
A child with dyslexia is not interested in the letters at all.
That's interesting.
Yeah. From the age of 3-4 years old, normally you start to write letters and draw things. For the child with dyslexia, again, there won't be an interest, right? So there's early signs. Yeah.
Early signs, but that is interesting in a society today where we're using phones and tablets. There's very few people or parents that are using old-fashioned books to read to their kids. Even drawing, they might get them a tablet to draw. So can we see that? How are we going to be able to detect this in the future with the rapid technology?
Very relevant question, but again, as you said, even when you bring out the iPad and you're talking about drawing, so you would see it even on the iPad because there are very many games. So this is still ongoing studies to see if iPads and screens are good for children or not. But there's some evidence to show that a screen can be used in a productive way to teach a child, right? So the child with dyslexia, when they get the screen and is playing games that have to do with writing, they'll be less interested.
Okay.
Yeah, because again, it's letters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the problem is actually the letters, and not even just writing down on a book, but you can write on a screen, obviously, right?
So then we should kind of switch and see that they can actually deal with the games with the letters and the games with just watching and just maybe listening in.
Yes.
So I'm scared. I'm not a mother yet, so I'm thinking by the time I'm a mother, it's going to be like a whole completely work. So basically, the solution I'm thinking now, just don't exclude the old-fashioned books. They're still very valid and very important.
Yeah, but when it comes to dyslexia, as I said again, one of the earliest signs is just simple nursery rhymes. So that doesn't even have anything to do with screens, right? So when it comes to listening to a nursery rhyme and repeating it and singing it, right? So children learn how to sing at a very early stage.
Yeah.
So the child with dyslexia will have problems with this. They won't be able to sing a normal nursery rhyme that they've heard over and over and over again.
Okay, so we can see this, we can early and hopefully try to deal with it however way that we can.
Seek help.
Yes,
Seek
obviously
help.
we're getting there.
Yes.
So you talked about ADHD.
Yeah.
And you already basically talked about how it can affect the learning. But from my experience with ADHD, these are people that are very highly intelligent as well. So how can that differ from a person with ADHD and dyslexia? Do they go hand in hand?
Sort of, or you could have a person that both has dyslexia and ADHD or ADD, right? Or just one of them. Yeah. So the bottom line or the heading of it is learning disabilities, right?
Yes.
And you could either have all of them or just one of them, or 2 or 3 of them in your learning disabilities.
Okay.
So they do go hand in hand depending on what difficulties you have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what strategies can help, especially I'm thinking of a classroom, students with learning disorders, dyslexia, how can we help them with this disorder to succeed in school? What is the main tool that we can give them?
Yeah, this actually requires quite a lot of work from the teachers, but obviously even a parent being involved in a child's learning, right? Because as we said, we should be able to see the signs early, and then from the very early classes when teachers meet parents and parents meet teachers and have these meetings about their children's progress, the feedback that they get back should be warning signs to pick this up. And should there be any signs that warn you that there might be a learning difficulty for this child, this is where help should be brought in. So a child with a learning disability does not benefit from being in a big classroom if they don't have an extra tutor with them.
All right.
Right? So if you have ADD, ADHD, you have someone, you should have someone that's focused more on you, because due to your attention span that is much shorter than everyone else, you're not going to be with the rest of the classroom and the teacher that's teaching, but so they should be able to be picked up by a teacher's aide or teacher's assistant that's together with the children that have learning disorders. Because That's one of the most important things. And this is not only for ADD, ADHD, even for dyslexia.
Okay.
So for the dyslexic child, student, adult, you need more time.
Okay.
And for the dyslexia, it's not due to a short attention span. It's because when you read, the words, as you said, everything just becomes muddled up, right?
Yes.
And you're throwing letters around, you're cutting words in half and throwing parts of the word around so that you do not form the sentences.
Okay.
If you have longer time to read, you take the time to actually read word for word for word.
Yes.
Other learning tools and aids are having someone narrate to you what is actually in there, if there isn't time. And why I bring this up is because some schools have made exams happen for people with for students with dyslexia by having a separate room for the students with dyslexia. You have a teacher narrating the question to them, because it means then they're not wasting time, or they need extra time, we said, right, to read. So they don't waste time reading the question, which we all know when it comes to exams, you become very stressed with time and just being nervous about writing an exam. So if you know that you also have a learning disability of dyslexia, which means you need extra time to read, this stresses you even more and will cause you to fail the exam, not because you're not knowledgeable.
Exactly.
But it's because you're not getting the time to actually read, and then you get even more stressed about writing, because this is part of the disorder, disability you have, and then you definitely fail twice, even before getting an opportunity. So being in a room during exams where you have someone narrating the question to you and giving you the ability to actually just narrate back your answer, which is being recorded, and that is what you're going to be examined on, your answers that you've narrated back, so you're not having the stress to actually write down your answers, because that takes longer for you due to your dyslexia. Then you've passed that hurdle and will allow you to progress in life with your disability. And with time, then you learn how to cope with this and get different mechanisms to succeed.
We've seen this, because exactly what you're describing, I saw this as already, because we're ahead here in Sweden. We're kind of ahead accepting this, and there are reasons that we'll get to that. So I've seen when we used to do exams at university level, they were nurses that were at university with me that used to get that room, and it was never any shame around it. It was just that it was not agreed upon, but it was accepted for many. And just like you said, every 10th person has dyslexia. So in a class, in a university setting, there are so many. So what they used to do is they had, I think there were like 2 rooms or something. So they would not take turns, but we'll have different rooms where they could also sit, and then have someone that they could ask if something was unclear. So this is really a very useful tool so that they use. I know that there are the ones that I've spoken to with this disability, it has been so severe that they had to use their finger, just like blind people, to read.
Yes.
Just to put their finger and follow through the word. And this is really a big disability, and that really gets to you. Because the first time I saw it, I wasn't confused, but it's kind of questionable, because I myself thought that it was kind of stressful when the smart kids, would get done with the test, the exam, and then go. That was very stressful, because then you feel stressed. So I can imagine someone with a reading disorder that has a diagnosis that has to go through that. So the rooms will be separate, and they could not be able to see us at the back. We could see them from the back. So it's really important to have that time and that space for yourself to take time to read through all of this and understand it. But again, having dyslexia or learning disabilities or disorder is not a measure of intelligence. That's what we're trying to get to, that even though you have trouble reading and writing, this is not a measure of your intelligence, right?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, on a personal note, I have some form of dyslexia because I realized probably at a young age, but around after actually high school, graduated, and was still figuring out what I wanted to do before I got into medicine. And for some reason, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer because I'm an argumentative person. So I thought, put this into practice. And also I wanted a job whereby I would be able to travel the world. I've always had a curiosity for that. So I applied into law school, actually. And I remember attending my second lecture, it was, and the professor comes out with this huge book and says, this is going to be your Bible for the rest of your studies here and your life. The law book. The law book. Exactly. And I said, oh, reading is my kind of problem. So I decided this is not for me. So I, dropped out of law school 3 days in.
Ironically, you became a doctor. How many books have you read that add up to that law book?
So obviously one would think, don't you need to read when you're going through med school? But yes, I guess to compensate with my reading disability, I found ways of coping with this.
Yes,
and one of them, I do have a photographic memory. So if I see text on the wall, I'll remember what's there. Okay. And then I don't need to remember all the exact words, but just the context it's in. Yeah. And that's what I've done, and that's the way I've made it through med school. So I've obviously read. It's taken me longer to read. So when I've had classmates telling me that they read, textbook to textbook, it's like, oh my God, you have energy. It's not got to do with energy. I know my disability. They don't know that. Yes. But I've been able to cope and even write a book, my PhD thesis, obviously. Okay. Not as thick as everyone else's, but
don't cut yourself short.
Long enough to make it a thesis.
Yeah.
And then I continue to enjoy books, but instead of reading, I actually listen, right? So there are loads of apps out there with ways to enjoy books without reading. So I still love books, but I found a way of enjoying books. That doesn't mean that I need to read them, because that would just take me too long, which takes down on my self-esteem because I never make it through a book. But I can listen to a book.
Yeah. So you're cutting yourself short, first of all. So if anybody has read her thesis, please join into this conversation, or maybe I can link it in the description box so people can actually read your thesis.
Yeah, sure.
So the reason we got into this is because we wanted to talk about how this can affect you as an adult. And you're talking about it from a positive sense. So really, it's kind of a shame that you never got a diagnosis as a child. Nobody picked up on that, but you did as many African women do. You fixed yourself, you solved the problem, you discovered this about yourself and helped yourself. So this is also the difference with finding coping mechanism and not living in shame and guilt and the stigma of having a learning disorder. So if we talked about you have this. I never got a diagnosis either. I don't want one either, for that matter. I don't know. It freaks me out because I don't want to know how severe it is, which is, maybe not something we should promote, but I know myself, it's numbers. It's numbers, and it's always been a fear of mine, being that I have two older brothers that are very, very, oh my God, they are basically blessed or whatever. They're very intelligent and they are really good with numbers. They're mathematicians. And the funny part about that is we had the same teacher in high school. Oh my God. And that man was so disappointed when it was my turn because he expected me to succeed as my brother. So as an adult, should we compare our successes like that? I discovered like that I had something that I didn't have what my brothers had, but I don't think that it was kind of shameful, but I guess it didn't hold me back. How can we cope as an adult with this?
I think that's a very, very good and relative question, but it's even broader than that, right? So this is a question of comparing ourselves generally to everything, right? So the focus today is obviously dyslexia, but I think that the most important part of this is comparing ourselves when we feel less good when it comes to anything, right? So in this situation, the older person here is the teacher, right? So a teacher should know not to compare.
But this is when you're kind of, well, I don't think he compared, but I just sensed he was excited to have me in his class because he knew my brothers, but he realized very soon
but with that excitement, if this teacher was knowledgeable enough, I'm not blaming them or anything, but I do believe over the years there's been so much little knowledge when it comes to teachers learning about different learning disabilities. So if this teacher actually had taken the time to give you the extra time, maybe you wouldn't have this dyscalculia, right?
But he tried, because I know one thing that he taught me. So you know when you get to a test and you have not only numbers to calculate, but you also have text to read. So what I did is because I knew that I'll probably get it wrong, I would read very quickly through the text and then try to solve the problem. And he came back to me and he said, "Did you actually read the question? Did you understand the question?" Because I think it was about more of a self-esteem as well. I knew that I couldn't do it, so I rushed myself through it. And he'd asked me to read the question like twice or three times to understand it. I still didn't get it, I don't know. But anyway, here we are. So my experience with that is also that I did get the help. And maybe it's because my mother made a really good decision to get me to, I guess, a better setting and school. I'm thankful for that. But not many people do. So if our parents, depending on where we are, so here in Sweden, we've got the tools and the help that we need all the way from childhood. But when you're in a setting where you don't get that, so your parent doesn't pick up on your learning disorder because of various reasons. Maybe they don't understand themselves what the problem is. So in our other culture, now African settings, we have a tendency of writing off the child very early, unfortunately, and then it becomes a thing of that child is stupid, which is very hurtful. And it also comes to a point where it's expensive to keep on paying for a child that is not learning because of learning disabilities. I mean, from what I've heard today is that it's really expensive to have these tutors and this extra help in school for these kids. How are we dealing with that? How are parents supposed to deal with? I mean, this is needed.
Yes, it's. I understand what you're saying, and the problem at hand, or the problem is probably a broader problem, and part of it is baseline. To get through a learning disability or disorder, you need extra help, and from an early age.
Yes.
Depending on the setting that you're in, it's easier. I'm not saying it's easy, not even in Sweden. It's not easy, but it's easier because people have become aware of it, so they've put teachers' assistants or teachers' aides in certain classrooms, whereby certain schools have actually tried to address this. And this is not the whole of Sweden. Even Sweden still has this problem, and Sweden is not unique when it comes to high-income countries having this problem. This is a problem that still exists even in high-income countries. But obviously in low-income countries, whereby you were referring to our African setting, and with our East African background, we have experience from there. But if we talk generally about low-income settings, this is a question of money many a time, right? In Sweden, no, because all education is free of charge.
Yes.
But then again, it becomes a money question, because should taxpayer money go to having more teachers in school or not? That's a broader question. But in low-income settings, I think it's the awareness, making parents and teachers aware of this disability and disorder, and putting a system in place that with the school fees, how can we make it so that schools can get assistance for children with learning disabilities, right? And if this is addressed, and I believe even before it became better in Sweden, there was this lack of knowledge.
Yes.
But with the knowledge and also addressing the fact that it's actually 1 in 10 people that have this, I said again, 8 billion people live with dyslexia, right?
Yes.
So it's a very common problem. So even in a low-income setting, if we just even go to, the people sitting in parliament, 1 in 10 of them has some sort of disorder.
Yeah.
And with this knowledge, I think changes can be made, making everyone aware, which will hopefully trickle down into the system and allow parents to continue to invest in their children before they write them off.
Yeah. Yes.
And obviously then better self-esteem for these children and more success stories.
I love how we have come from preventative health to politics, which I always say, health is politics. Unfortunately, it always boils down to people that make decisions about our schools, and then going back to the charity at home. So it all goes hand in hand. We can't really blame one person or one system. It all goes hand in hand. So let's go back to the questions. So we talked about the shame and the stigma and childhood issues. So we have talked about how we can accommodate the students and children, but are learning disabilities hereditary?
What do you think? Yes, they are. So it's been shown that if you have a parent with learning disability or disorder, there is up to a 60% risk that you'll also have it.
Yes.
Yeah. It's about 40 to 60% risk that you'll have inherited it.
So really, if I know that I have trouble reading, chances are that my child will have trouble.
There's a high chance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, but because I'm thinking about parents, because there are some parents that don't know how to read. That is a whole other issue. They didn't go to school. They're illiterate, basically. So that's not the same thing.
No, definitely not.
But then, if you know that you have had the opportunity to go to school but still have trouble reading and writing, chances are that your child will have the same issue.
Yes.
So where I'm trying to get with this question is that is already a tool for you to help your child and not write them off. So we're going back to the basics, to where it begins from, where the charity begins from, and then don't write your child off. But this can scare many kids away if a parent, because I'm thinking about talking about the issue at home to begin with. I can see that you are having trouble reading and writing. I have that problem too. Just going to talk about it and not blame the child and project on your child and expect them to maybe succeed in something that they're already, should I say, doomed not to, kind of.
I think it's a question of also the society that you live in.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Because,
we've talked in Sweden, this has been a big issue because it already started the discussion in the 1940s, I believe, with our Swedish king, King Carl Gustav XVI. He has learning disabilities, which were really seen very early in his schooling, and he passed it on to his kids. Now, this topic is very huge here because of that, and there are organizations that his daughter, the queen to be, the crown princess Victoria, she has put organizations to help schools with this and also help families through this and talk about this more. Is that something that we should do more? Because I felt like we had to. I felt like this was something, also just me and you talking about this, being that we have different experiences. So the way that I deal with this, well, first of all, university was not easy because we have to learn. We have the part in nursing school where you have to count.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But I had the tools for that. Not many people do. So if we make this, if we can talk about this and make this what's the word in social media? Normalize this.
Yeah.
Normalize that
Yeah.
disabilities
Yes.
or learning disabilities are okay.
I think that is the key, actually, and we've spoken, I've come back to it several times, and I'll bring it up again, how normal this is.
Common.
1 in 10 people.
Yeah.
1 in 10 people. So in your social media feeds, just remember, every 10th person reading has dyslexia,
Yeah.
right? 8 billion people live with this every single day, so it's very, very common. So talking about it, yes, I think that will help, and at the end of the day, this affects a person's self-esteem. So
Yes.
if we can affect people's self-esteem, but just by addressing some that is very, very normal. I mean, you shouldn't be doomed in life because of something that you can actually get help with,
Yes.
and still succeed in life.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So this was very intriguing. So when we talk about disabilities, the learning dyslexia, should this really set you back from academia?
No. No, definitely not. I will point out, I don't believe everyone should go into academia for different reasons. But if you choose to get into academia and you believe you have a learning disability or disorder, this will not get in your way because there is help to get.
And I'm thinking, going back to the parents projecting on their children, because you want your child to be a doctor, a lawyer. Should everybody be is everybody going to be, is it possible for everyone to expect the expectations that the parents have on their children? Let's talk about that. Like, why is there so many?
Well, this is obviously a totally different topic that doesn't have anything to do with dyslexia. But of course, when you have a parent that expects you to become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and you also have a learning disability, this becomes even more of an issue.
An issue,
right?
yes.
But the other topic I think we'll discuss
expectations,
on another day.
No,
when
but
it comes
I
to
wanted to talk
expectations.
about in that sense of having a learning disability and having these expectations, because that could like set you back so much.
Yes.
Like you have to succeed and you feel like you cannot succeed because there's so many other paths that you can choose.
I think the responsibility has to come from the actual parent that is putting these expectations on the child to actually learn what's going on in a child's learning. Right? So when you have your parent-teacher meetings, parents should be more involved and try to pick up if they've been getting report after report, your child cannot write or your child cannot read, or when it comes to comprehension, they're always behind. This should be a warning signal for the parent that's pushing for their child to become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, anything that's academic. If this is really important for you as a parent, then I think it's also should be important to you to look into why
are they not.
Are they not? They could be just a general interest that is lacking, but if the person is falling short due to a learning disability, then it's actually your responsibility as a parent to make sure that they get the tools.
Thank you for highlighting that. Thank you. So we're going to round up, and I want to say, like I said in the beginning of this conversation, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I get so inspired and I always learn so much new stuff. You have blessed us with your presence here today, and thank you so much for being here. And hopefully you'll be back.
Thank you for having me.
To talk about something else. So thank you to Dr. Helen again for joining us. And thank you everybody that has tuned in. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on this topic, very interesting topic. If you have any issues with learning disabilities or learning disorders, make sure that you join into the comment section and tell us what is it that you want to add to this conversation. And waiting for a next conversation, sit down with Dr. Helen. Make sure you give me your comments on what you would like us to talk about. Again, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and also hit that notification bell. And I'll see you in the next episode of Nurse Aisha. Thank you so much for watching.